Skylanders Imaginators is very much the most hated Skylanders game. As much as I hate to say it, I think that is just the truth. So many people hate on it so much. You might think it's Superchargers, but Superchargers, I believe, has more people who love it than Imaginators does. And although they might have the same amount of hate, there's more people sort of pulling Superchargers' reputation back up compared to Imaginators. So I wanted to make a video today to pretty much go over all the issues that people have with Imaginators, all the reasons why people don't like Imaginators, and just address all of them, just address why I still like the games despite, or why I still like that specific game despite all the glaring issues that it has and things that people point out all the time. So that's what we're going to do in today's video. I'm not sure if it's going to be crazy edited like my normal videos. I mean, my normal videos, the editing already isn't that insane, but this video, it's probably just going to be more of a like relaxed, chill, laid back one. You could probably listen to it like a podcast. It might be a longer one and just enjoy the video. Hopefully you guys can understand my opinions. Of course, these are just my opinions, so it should be pretty fun. But these, I'm just going to be going over like each individual issue and then sort of giving my opinions on it and just why it doesn't bother me that much, I guess. So without further ado, let's hop right into it. So to start off with, I feel like one of the biggest things is just that the old Skylanders from previous Skylanders games feel kind of useless. They feel very weak and they don't feel the same as Senseis. Something that a lot of people actually don't understand is a concept that's in the Vicarious Visions games and not the Toys for Bob games. And it's also in Imaginators. It's called hit stop. Basically, when you hit an enemy and the game sort of like freezes for a second to like emphasize the impact of that hit. Yeah, that's what hit stop is. Superchargers, Swap Force, and Imaginators does it. But in Imaginators, the Senseis don't do it, but every other Skylander does, making every other Skylander feel very different from the Senseis, and it just makes them kind of feel off and like they aren't meant for that game. That's kind of just something else. It's kind of just like a random thing that I wanted to point out, but I digress. Back to what we were talking about, which is the old Skylanders. Yes, they were all kind of nerfed into the ground. Why this doesn't really bother me is because when I go into a Skylanders game, when I'm playing a Skylanders game, I'm using the characters from that game. So when I'm playing Imaginators, I use the Senseis and I use Creation Crystals. That's pretty much all I use. And if you use those, the game is going to still be awesome. It's going to feel like any other Skylanders game balancing wise. If you go back and use old Skylanders, you will run into that issue. This is definitely an issue with the game, but it's just not something that affects me because when I play Trap Team, I use Trap Team Skylanders. When I play Giants, I use the Giants and the Giants cores. I use Swap Force cores and Swappers and Swap Force. You get the idea. I don't really mess with Skylanders from previous games when I'm playing one of the Skylanders games. So this issue just really doesn't affect me. Do I think they needed to nerf all the old Skylanders in the ground? No, not really. I think they could have made the Senseis still feel powerful and unique without doing this and completely butchering all the old Skylanders. But nonetheless, it's not really a big issue for me, although it does kind of come up when I play Locks, I guess. Now, looking at the next one, it's going to be lots of content is locked behind expensive figures. Now, this is just like objectively true. Nowadays, looking at the pricing for a lot of the Senseis and Imaginators, if you want a Sensei of each element, as well as Robo and Wildstorm and Dr. Crank, or not Dr. and Dr. Neo Cortex or Crash to unlock those 3 adventure packs, that is a ton of money. Robo and Wildstorm, of course, like you're gonna spend like $500 to get those 2. And it's just really not worth it for the most part. I don't feel like you need them. But again, if you don't have them, a lot of the game's content is locked away. You also have to buy their blue chest, which adds like another $40 to each. So it gets very expensive very fast. If you want to access all the elemental realms and get all the Imaginai pieces that are exclusive to Wildstorm and Robo, as well as their levels, you are going to spend a lot of money. For me personally, this hasn't really been an issue because I think when I look at Imaginators, I guess the release cycle was kind of messed up. Some Skylanders were released just so late that it was like really difficult to find them. Do I think this hurts the actual game? Not really too much. I think it's really frustrating to me to see people using modern day prices of a game that's 8 years old and was released pretty much when its franchise was dying as a reason to hate that game. Because modern day prices, Robo for $300, he was never meant to cost $300. There was never a piece of content, one level in Skylanders, that was meant to be locked behind a $400 figure. That was never the intention. The intention was just for him to be another $25 expansion pack. But of course, he wasn't because the franchise started dying and he wasn't produced that much, which led to him being rare. I also think Toys R Us was, well, like closing down was part of the reason why this guy was so rare, because I only ever saw him in Toys R Us. That might have been the only store he ever came out in. That's really the only place I ever hear from people who found him in stores back in the day. That's the only store I ever hear him being I don't even know. I can't speak for some reason, but well, you know what I'm trying to say. That's the only store I ever hear of people finding him in. So with that being said, like, I think that had a big reason to these figures being rare. And still, I made a whole video really going over the cheapest way to access all the content. So, I mean, there's the Sensei realms. If you want to get into each Sensei realm, a lot of them, there's Senseis for like 15 bucks that you can get for pretty much every element. Dark is really the only main exception. There isn't really a cheap Sensei in that element. So it's frustrating to see people complain about this, but again, I get it. I was also lucky enough to still be completely into the franchise when Imaginators came out. I was still full force a crazy Skylanders fan. I was super excited for Imaginators to come out, and I bought figures all the way through its life cycle. I got Wildstorm and I got Robo for retail back in the day, so I always had access to those two levels, which means, like, of course, I'm going to be a little biased. If I have something that others don't, that others have to spend a bunch of money for, that I didn't have to drop $300 on, then of course I'm going to just be in a situation where I'm more inclined to not see it from their perspective, and I'm going to see it from my own perspective where, hey, it was just another Skylanders adventure pack that I bought that gave me this content. But I can see where people come from when they complain about that issue. But to be fair, I feel like that could have been an issue with any Skylanders game. Like, I guess Trap Team, there isn't specifically content locked behind the cores, and the cores are most of the rare Skylanders. But again, it's just like Imaginators would put it in a bad situation. If Trap Team, if Nightlight and Nightmare and their adventure packs ended up being the super rare pieces that no one could find, and it wasn't Spotlight and Blackout, then people would probably complain about that game a lot more, because Spotlight and Blackout don't really unlock anything compared to Nightlight and Nightmare, which have their own level and they can access all the elemental gates. Imaginators was just forced into this bad situation, and then again, people complain about it. But objectively looking at it, yes, it is an issue that it costs a lot of money to complete the game, to access all the content. Something that I do have an issue with, though, is people that slander Imaginators that don't have any of this stuff. They don't have Wildstorm, they don't have Robo. That's acceptable, that's fine. But if you're gonna slander Imaginators that you haven't played the Thumpin' Islands, the Griffin Park Observatory, and Chancellor Elven Forest, or any of the Sensei realms, or any of the Brain missions, then that annoys me, because that's a lot of content that isn't too expensive. It's not going to be much more expensive than any other Skylanders game that you're just ignoring because on your first playthrough you only had a couple Senseis, and so you didn't like it, and you had to use old cores, which are all nerfed into the ground. It's just like this endless cycle that's looped, that's really hard to avoid when it comes to Imaginators. Those two first issues were mainly going over like the figures and how the figures worked with the games. Now we got to get into one of the main aspects of the game that is really dogged on by the whole community, and this is the story. Yes, Imaginator's story is bad. I will admit that. It's not something that I'm going to hide. Like, the story is not good. The story in this game, a lot of it doesn't make sense. It's very random, and it like goes all over the place, and it's really hard to keep track of. So yeah, the story, it's kind of cooked in Imaginators. Does this make the game objectively worse? Well, it depends. I made a poll recently that was about whether people prefer story or gameplay more. The majority of people prefer gameplay. There's a small group of people I know that prefer story. I think it's about like 15% of people prefer story, 85% of people find gameplay to be more important, but it just comes down to each person. For me, I always prioritize gameplay over story. So when I'm playing through Imaginators, I'm going to skip all the cutscenes. I really don't need to see the story. I skip the dialogue. I don't listen to any of that. I just play through the levels. I play to actually play the game. I don't want to sit and not be able to touch my controller and just have to watch a loading screen that's basically hidden behind a cutscene, if you know what I'm saying. So the story, I can get it. If you play video games for the story, then this is going to hurt this game. But I mean, looking at the entire franchise, I don't think anyone is playing Skylanders for the story. If you're a complete story enthusiast, you play video games to be immersed in their deep stories. I don't know why you're playing Skylanders. I think most people who played Skylanders, again, it was targeted at kids. It was targeted at young kids who thought the gimmick was cool, being able to put Skylanders on a portal and play as the end game. It was targeted at these people who they really, probably for the most part, didn't even understand what was going on in the story. Maybe in some of the more like basic Skylanders games, like the bare bones stories, it was easy to catch on. But with the Imaginators, really no one knew what was going on, but the kids didn't care. They played because they could put these figures on a portal and play as them in game. That's why people played this game. It's the same as every other Skylanders game, but it is very true that this game, I think, objectively has the worst story because it just doesn't make sense a lot of points. But for me personally, and for I think a lot of the target demographic of Skylanders and the community nowadays, overwhelmingly more people care about the gameplay and the gimmick compared to the story, which is really why this doesn't affect me too much when it comes to my opinions on Imaginators. Now, the next one, I would say it's a more important aspect of Imaginators. This is the levels. A lot of people say the levels are quote-unquote uninspired. I'm not really sure what that means, but that is literally the quote that a lot of people use to describe the levels in Imaginators. I'm pretty sure it means like they just feel bland and like soulless and just kind of dead to play through. You don't really feel anything. If that's what people are saying, then I can get it to a point. The levels in Imaginators do feel like they're missing just something that isn't there from the other games. I don't know if it's the music, which we'll get to later. I don't know if it's just the lack of exploration. I'm not totally sure, but something does feel different about the levels in Imaginators. Is this really a bad thing that affects how I feel about the game? Not really. What I do want to say about Imaginators levels is I can appreciate them for part of the reason for them being like this is because the story was all messed up, but the levels are, each one of them is completely unique. It's basically like Trap Team, that's probably the closest comparison, or Superchargers. They all have completely unique levels. There's no recycled level themes. You move to these different areas throughout Skylands. It's very easy to do that when you have a story that's all over the place. Like you're baking a cake for chaos out of absolutely nowhere. So let's go to an amusement park. Like it's super random, but again, it gives you an easy way to actually have a bunch of unique level themes, which I can appreciate. Does it make the levels really worse? I don't know. I'm not a fan of the Swap Force levels because those repeated level themes, they're super long. I think Imaginators levels are fine. More of a complaint that people have is the game not having many levels. There's only 10, and some of them are some real stinkers. Fizzland is the main one that stands out for me as a level that's just really bad. I don't like playing through Fizzland. Every gimmick in that level is horrible. I think the design of it and just the atmosphere does not feel fun at all. I feel like that level ruined Pop Fizz as a character, which really sucks because he's super cool. Fizzland I'm not a fan of, but I think there's some good levels. Personally, I really like Mushroom River and Abandoned Amusement Park. I know those aren't like the craziest hot takes on the planet. Those are pretty much probably the two most beloved levels from Imaginators. So those aren't really outlandish opinions or anything to like those two levels. I do think there's some good ones. Personally, I like the Chaos final level, but I don't think it's anything too crazy. A lot of it could also come down to I like more linear levels as long as a level feels like it actually has progression. Something that I have a problem with is when a level feels like you're stuck in the same spot throughout the entire thing and you never actually go anywhere. I don't like that. Even if a level has limited exploration and side routes and hidden areas, as long as it feels like you're starting in one spot, progressing through an entire level and getting to the end, I'm gonna like it. And I think Imaginators does this pretty well for the most part. A lot of levels do actually feel like you're progressing through it. As well as I have access to some of the better levels in Imaginators with the adventure packs. Again, that goes back to the figures being expensive, complaint that people have. But I have access to those, which I think if you have access to all the adventure packs, the sort of average level, the rating you'd give the average level in Imaginators goes up because some of the expansion packs are much better than the base game levels. The levels, yes, I don't think they're top notch. I don't think they're the best you've ever seen in Skylanders. I would definitely say Superchargers does what Imaginators was trying to do a lot better with having these unique level themes that definitely vary. Superchargers, I definitely think takes the cake there over Imaginators, but Imaginators levels, I don't think are that bad. But I can see and very much understand the complaint when people say the levels are soulless or whatever, or uninspired or whatever. Now, the next issue people have is the stock music. This is an issue that none of the other Skylanders games had. All the other Skylanders games had original music made specifically for them. And Imaginators, I could be wrong, but I don't think it had a single piece of music that wasn't stock music or music that was reused from another game. I don't think it had any original music created for it, which, yes, this is going to hurt the game. Using only stock music. As a content creator, I can't use any music from Imaginators because it's all copyrighted, which kind of sucks. But again, that's an issue that no one's going to run into. That was just I digress. The Imaginator stock music, does it really affect the game for me? Not really. As someone who doesn't really prioritize music that much in a video game, I don't really care that much. I would rather put my earbuds in and listen to my own music while I play the game versus actually listening to the in-game music. Can it make the atmosphere and overall experience better when a game has good music? Yes, absolutely. That's one of the saving graces of Swap Force levels, is that I think they have some really good music sprinkled throughout them. Same with Trap Team and Superchargers, I would say. And for the most part, all 5 games have that now that I think about it. But the Imaginators, I don't think has that because, again, it is stock stock music, so it's going to just be a lot more bland in general. It's not going to have that special Skylanders charm or feel that all the other Skylanders games have, which is, it's a stinker. Like, it would be nice if this game didn't have stock music. But as a person who isn't really invested into Skylanders for the music, it doesn't really matter that much to me. I'm playing for the gameplay once again. Can the music accentuate the gameplay, make it better? Yes, but half the time I don't even have the volume high enough to hear the music anyway, so it's just not a big deal for me. However, if you play Skylanders for the music, then this game is going to be a huge letdown, a huge disappointment, because you're not going to get any music that you want. It's going to all be stock music, bland, basic, and just not original, which of course I get why people complain about. I've covered a lot of the main issues that a lot of people hear a bunch of the time. I have a few more that I want to go over that are just sort of, I wouldn't say they're any smaller, less people complain about them. There's a smaller number of people who complain about these, but I think they're for the most part just as important as the previous issues. That's how I would phrase that. Now, the first one here is going to be that Imaginators sort of ruined the ending of Superchargers. I think this is actually something that I do agree with. I think Superchargers was a great finale, a great wrap up to the Skylanders franchise. It seemed like the darkness had been hyped up since the very beginning, and then we finally got to battle him and defeat him. Yeah, I was in a vehicle and the fight kind of sucked, but it was a cool ending nonetheless. I respected Superchargers and its story for having that ending. It was a really nice way to close off the franchise. And then Imaginators just came back with a horrible story that a lot of people were disappointed with, especially after how good Supercharger's story and finale was. I don't think it's Imaginators' fault. I mean, they had to do something with Imaginators to contend. Like, Superchargers did just well enough for there to be another game in the franchise. So they came out with Imaginators. It couldn't just not have a story, so it had to have something. And so it kind of sucks that a lot of people didn't like it because they felt it disrespected what Superchargers had done for the franchise by giving it a nice ending that a lot of people appreciated it for. But again, I mean, Imaginators, I don't think you can really blame it for doing that. It's just that the franchise had to continue, so they had to do something. And yeah, it just did seem like Chaos's story and the story of Skylands and all that had been wrapped up in Superchargers. And then boom, actually no, we get to enjoy one last story that's really bland and basic and weird and really bad at the same time as being really basic. So that I can understand that issue. Personally, I do think it kind of ruined it. It is, again, subjective. Did it ruin the ending of Superchargers? I don't think it ruins the Superchargers magic. I think when you look at the story of Skylanders as an entirety, it would have been a lot more of a clean ending that would have really had more like long-standing praise with most people compared to what we got with Imaginators. If Imaginators didn't happen, a lot of people probably would have appreciated the entire story of all 6 games or all 5 games if it had just ended with Superchargers. But I digress. That's pretty much that whole issue covered. The next one is going to be the bosses in Imaginators are horrible. Now, as far as this one goes, yeah, I agree. The theming of them is very basic. You're just going to call all them Doomlanders. I guess something that I do like to clown on is that they just took the name Doom Raiders and like swapped out one word and then made it like they mixed Doom Raiders and Skylanders together. It was so cool. Like, it's the most bland, basic thing ever. It isn't hard to create a name for a new group of villains. Like, Doom Raiders was so cool, and then we got Doomlanders, which is it's horrible, dude. It's a really bad name for all these villains. I don't like it at all. And then my issue is not actually the boss fights themselves. I think having them all linked to a specific battle class is fine. What it does is it makes each fight feel pretty much unique. All of them feel diverse, and they feel good for the most part. I like the boss battles in this game. The actual bosses themselves, though, all the Doomlanders, they're so repetitive and they're so basic. They're just Imaginator designs with like kind of weird, wacky proportions. Maybe they're a little bit bigger. It's not good. The designs in this game are really bad, and it does make all the bosses feel hateable and Chaos feel hateable and just the game feel hateable because of the bosses. I can agree with that. In a normal playthrough, though, the bosses feel fine to fight against, though. And there's one at the end of each level, which some people are going to like, some people aren't going to like. It really just comes down to what you think. But it does make them feel repetitive, which I can understand that. The bosses aren't too big of an issue for me, but I wish we got more unique bosses compared to just, of course, the sort of copy and paste Doomlanders that we got. Now, the next one is that the game is too short. This one is just kind of, I feel like Imaginators was rushed to an extent. It does have the least amount of levels from any Skylanders game. It only has 10 main game levels. And what's really weird is I'm pretty sure one level was canceled. If you all have done the fight in Imaginators against Chaos, he uses Sentinel Doomlanders, which actually never appeared in the game. They never had a fight. And then there's also concept art for Scraft levels. And Imaginators was like, dang, we should have gotten at least a couple more levels, or at least one more level that had this Doom Raider in it. And we didn't. So it's really weird. I don't know why they did that. I feel like that wasn't a good move on their part to do that, but it's just, they should have had that extra level. And then the reason like this isn't an issue for me at all, the whole like the game being too short and the levels there aren't enough, is because if you actually go out of your way to play through the Sensei realms, which here this is my issue. People complain about the game being short after coming off of what, let's say Trap Team, for example, or Giants, sure, where people play through the elemental gates and it extends the length of the game even if there aren't like that many more levels. Actually, that's not really a good way to say it, because Giants and Trap Team both have a decent amount of levels. But again, the game is being extended because the elemental gates inside the levels. What Imaginators did, which I actually like, is it got rid of the elemental gates in favor of elemental Sensei realms, which I think are really cool. It's an entire level rather than just a bunch of tiny little areas that don't really offer too much. I can really appreciate Imaginators for doing that. If you play through the story and in between each level play through a Sensei realm, the story is going to feel like it's way longer. You're going to like it way more. Everything's going to feel way more diverse. I think that's the best way to do it, and that is the equivalent of playing through all the elemental gates. This is something that I don't get this complaint if you don't do that. If you think the game is too short, at least, I mean, you have Sensei and Golden Queen. You have Kingpin and Golden Queen, and at least you're probably going to have a couple other Senseis if you're playing through this game. And so just play through some elemental realms in between your levels. It is going to make the game feel way better, I'm sure. And so that's a complaint that it's like, okay, they got rid of the elemental gates. Now you're just not going to do anything about it. If you just try to rush through the story and beat the game as fast as possible, yeah, it's going to feel like it's a fast game. Like, come on now. It's just, a lot of these complaints are, they're kind of difficult for me to fathom, but again, it's all personal preference. But objectively, Imaginators does technically have the shortest main story of any of the Skylanders games, with 10 levels that aren't exceptionally long or anything like that. Now the next one is the removed features from Superchargers. Imaginators does have quite a few of these. They removed the level select, the portal master rank, and online co-op. Those are like the main few. I thought the portal master rank from Superchargers was cool. It was a good idea. Did they really need it? I don't think so. It gave some cool perks and stuff that was pretty helpful looking back, but did we really need this in Skylanders? I wouldn't say so. I don't think this is something we desperately needed to have in the game, the Portal Master rank. I think the exclusion of it doesn't really hurt Imaginators at all. What does really confuse me about Imaginators is it didn't have online co-op. This was an amazing feature in Superchargers that I think a bunch of people actually use, or a bunch of people in the Skylanders community still like to use today and still praise Superchargers for, which I 100% agree with. That was a really cool idea to have online co-op, and it's just something you gotta introduce in games nowadays, unless it's strictly single player. If there's any sort of co-op, it just makes sense to have an online option for it as well. And it's something Superchargers did good with. I think the online co-op in Superchargers was pretty good looking back. And then when we look at Imaginators, they removed it. Why did they remove it? I don't know. And what actually baffles me even more is that they kept the online racing in Imaginators. They kept an old feature from Superchargers with the online, but they didn't keep the core gimmick of Skylanders with online, which Superchargers previously had. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. The core gameplay didn't have it, but they brought back an old gimmick to keep online. It really baffles me. I don't get why they did that at all. It's pretty weird. But again, I can understand where that can play, because I would love to play online Imaginators co-op, but it's not accessible. I think the game would definitely be better if they had it, and it doesn't make sense to delete it. I think that people's biggest issue isn't that Imaginators doesn't have online co-op, it's that the game before it did, and then Imaginators removed it for no apparent reason. I don't see any reason why they could have just not kept it. So it just it's really weird. And then we have the level select. Yeah, Imaginators hub, it's kind of very subjective whether you like it or not having to go around and find each level individually. Me personally, yeah, I like it. I think it's cool. But a level select screen would have been a nice option to have. And then when you look at Superchargers, it has chapters. It went way deeper into, like, it has 52 chapters. Each level is split into 4 sections. Some of them are less sections, I think, but for the most part, 4 sections is the normal. And then you look at Imaginators, it not only got rid of the chapters in levels, but it got rid of the level select screen entirely, so you have to find the level yourself. If you don't know where your favorite level is at, you're just kind of screwed. I think it's a cool gimmick having to explore the hub world to find your level, but again, it just comes down to personal preference whether you like it or not. I personally do like it. I think it's kind of cool, and at this point I know where every level is, so it's not really a deal breaker for me, but that's just something to note as well. This was definitely more of like a sit back, chill, you maybe play Imaginators while listening to this video. I hope you guys enjoyed though. It was something that I wanted to make for a while just to sort of explain where I'm coming from. I don't want to be like aggressive with any of this stuff. It's more just I respect everyone's opinion, and I hope you guys can respect mine and where I'm coming from, because I do want to see the other side, see where people are coming from when they hate on my favorite Skylanders game, when they say it's really bad. And for the most part, I do. I understand almost every one of those complaints. A lot of them just don't apply to me. I don't care about them that much. It doesn't affect the game that much, or it does, but that's just an aspect of the game that doesn't really matter to me that much. So it's just my personal opinion that I love Imaginators at the end of the day. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It was very much like sort of just a chill, relaxed video. Please feel free to leave your opinion down in the comments below. If there's any sort of aspect that I missed, maybe I'll make a part 2 or something. I don't know. But if there's anything you guys hate about Imaginators that I didn't cover in this video, please feel free to leave a comment. Or if you guys like Imaginators and agree with me, then the comment down below as well. I love reading your guys' comments. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye, everybody.